Welcome to Pawnee, Indiana, the greatest town in America. Pawnee, the fourth obese city in America, is home to Sweetums and everybody's favorite mini horse, Little Sebastian. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the greatest television shows of all time, Parks and Recreation. Over the course of this podcast, we will be discussing iconic characters, memorable moments, and how an original idea of a spinoff of The Office turned into something greater. I am your host, William DeVere, and let's talk about Parks and Rec. Begin the episode by starting at the first thing we are going to talk about is the first thing we are going to talk about. Normally on this podcast, we usually talk about different Parks and Rec characters from Leslie Knope, Andy Dwyer, Ron Swanson, and etc. Even though we will be doing kind of the same today, I do want to feature an episode covering the character Mark Brendanawicz. Oh yes, Mark Brendanawicz, the forgotten Parks and Rec character. We will be talking about what happened to Mark after actor Paul Schneider departed the show after season 2 and why Mark didn't work in the atmosphere of Parks and Recreation. So, Mark Brendanawicz. He was supposed to be the straight man of Parks and Rec, the one that audience could connect to. The Jim Halpert on The Office is the perfect example. Jim was surrounded by Michael Scott, Dwight Schrute, Ryan Howard, and other very weird people, Creed even, in The Office, and Jim served as the everyday man we could follow along with in the midst of absurd chaos. And Jim was the perfect straight man. He was likable, he was funny, all of his creative pranks on Dwight, his romance with Pam, and we could root for him. That is why John Krasinski's performance will go down as one of the best straight men on TV. But talking in terms of Mark Brendanawicz on Parks and Rec, as I say in the intro, how an original idea of a spinoff of The Office turned into something greater. As I probably said on the pod before, Parks and Rec was supposed to be a direct spinoff to The Office, but eventually it became Parks and Recreation. And that isn't why season 1 isn't as critically beloved than all the other seasons. And Parks and Rec at that time was basically kind of, I hate to say it, a ripoff of on The Office. Leslie was the Michael Scott, Ron was the stern Dwight Schrute, Tom was probably if Kelly and Ryan had a baby, and Mark was Jim, and April, I guess, Creed, and Ann was Karen because Rashida Jones also appeared in The Office. And they made it look like, in season 1, that Mark and Leslie were going to be the Jim and Pam of Parks and Rec. And as we know, it did not exactly work out with Leslie and Mark at all. There wasn't enough chemistry between Amy Poehler and Paul Schneider. They are both good individuals. I am not blaming both of them. They did what they could, but they were two separate characters that shouldn't have had any chemistry whatsoever. It happens. Having said that, Mark was at the center of season 1 along with Leslie, Tom, and Ann, and I didn't really mind it, really. He did pretty much fit in with the style that season 1 conveyed, a show mirroring The Office, and Mark was able to provide the straight man trope of the show while it lasted. But headed into season 2, the whole show did a whole 180. Parks and Recreation became Parks and Rec. All of a sudden, Parks and Recreation was a phenomenal show. It was creative. We started to get guest stars, side characters, funny storylines, and great episodes filled with laughter. Characters such as Donna, Ron, April, Andy, and even Jerry began to emerge into fan favorites. but Mark was left in the season 1 limbo. He was pretty much thrown to the side. He was on screen very little, and when he was on screen, I didn't really want to spend time with him. I wanted to check out the relationship dynamics with Leslie and Anne, April and Andy, Leslie and Ron, etc. I was very invested in the funny plot lines and the greatness of Parks and Rec, whereas Mark just felt very out of place. Unlike most of the other characters, he wasn't given a huge arc, if not any arc. He wasn't compelling. He really did not do much to the show. His only purpose was to be in a relationship with Ann Perkins and create a love triangle with Andy. I did like Mark and Ann for a little bit, but after Andy started to get close with April, all my enjoyment went to them, and Mark and Ann's relationship crumbled. Then it was getting to the point where Mark was not working on Parks and Rec, and it was time for, as you know, he lasted until the end of season 2, pretty much for the latter half of season 2. He was on the side. He wasn't in a lot of scenes, but everything changed in the master plan. The arrival of 2 amazing characters, Chris Traeger and Ben Wyatt, who made Parks and Rec turn into something greater. And that was the episode where Mark announced he was leaving Pawnee. He got a job offer. I believe it was in construction. I have to go back and watch that episode. Leslie gets mad for some reason and calls Mark. Mark Brandana quits, which is a hilarious moment for Amy Poehler to shine as Leslie. That is total Leslie no. He gave her plans for an empty lot and pretty much faded away. And he was never to be seen again. When it came to Mark, things got a little weird for the following seasons of Parks and Rec. All the characters, the writers all forgot he pretty much existed. There was zero mention of him. There was no like, hey guys, did you hear Mark got married? Oh, so cool. April would be like, oh geez, Leslie, do we really need to hear about that? And then Jerry would do something stupid and then would switch the dynamic of that scene. But no, we didn't get any mention of Mark. Nothing more about the blueprint of the lot. In the episode where Anne has all of her boxes of all of her old boyfriend's items, there was an Andy box, a Tom box, a Chris box, but no Mark box. Everyone pretty much seemed to forgot about him. On a different note, I am happy they wrote him out in Parks and Recreation, but what I'm not happy about is that he was forgotten forever. We did not even get to see him in the finale or in Leslie's wedding or any other scene after season 2. He probably should have returned in the final episode. At the flash forward where they all get together, we should have seen him again. See where he is in life. Does he have a family? Even if he had one line or even a cameo or just was in the scene, I'd be okay. But they completely forgot about Mark. Even though Mark wasn't a key person in the whole show, he was the center of attention in season 1 and maybe 1/8 of season 2. We should have seen him again. However, I'm not going to hold a grudge forever because Parks and Rec is a phenomenal show. We should move past it. It's okay. And so finally, with the departure of Mark, Parks and Rec gods gave us 2 amazing television characters in Chris and Ben, who were perfect for Anne and Leslie, respectively, and carried the show on their backs to something even greater. I think the lesson Parks and Rec learned with Mark was to ditch the tone of The Office and become something greater, and that meant Mark had to go. Be original. I want people to know is Mark wasn't a bad character. He had good moments in his show. There is a scene with him and Ron that's pretty funny, but he was a character that didn't work in the show. It happens. I wish Paul Schneider the best in his future projects to showcase his great talent because he is indeed a good actor. It is not the actor's fault. He did what he could and eventually it just didn't work out. It happens. That is all the time we have today for our show. Join us next time as we are going back to the normal episode. We'll be talking about Adam Scott's sensational Ben Wyatt. I hope you'd enjoy this. Once again, thanks to Aaron Parker, LaPorte High School, and I'll see you next time on Parks and Rec.